For much of his career, Craig Melvin believed the job of a journalist was simple: show up, ask the questions, tell the truth, and let the viewers decide what it meant. It was a philosophy shaped in the early years of reporting, when ambition burned brightly and every assignment felt like a step forward. But time has a quiet way of refining our understanding of responsibility. After decades in broadcasting and countless hours on the set of Today, Craig Melvin came to recognize that the profession carried a deeper duty, one that extended far beyond delivering headlines. It involved protecting the well-being of the people who gathered those stories in the first place. The realization didn't arrive all at once. It emerged slowly, through the voices of field reporters who returned from difficult assignments, carrying the invisible weight of what they had witnessed. Some had covered natural disasters, where entire communities had been washed away overnight. Others had stood in neighborhoods shaken by violence or loss. On camera, they remained steady and professional, but behind the scenes, Craig noticed something that experience had taught him not to ignore: fatigue in their eyes, pauses in their voices, the subtle signals of emotional exhaustion. He remembered being younger and believing that strength meant pushing forward no matter what, that the best journalists were the ones who never showed strain. But watching colleagues quietly struggle forced him to reconsider that belief. Journalism, he realized, was not just about gathering facts, it was about caring for the people brave enough to stand at the front lines of difficult stories. That insight followed him home one evening after a particularly heavy broadcast. The studio lights had faded, the control room had gone silent, and the familiar rhythm of Manhattan traffic carried him back through the city. When he stepped through the door, the calm of home wrapped around him like a gentle pause. In the kitchen, Lindsay Charniak looked up with the easy smile of someone who understood the world he worked in because she had spent years navigating it herself. Their conversations often circled back to journalism, not in the way outsiders imagine, filled with dramatic revelations, but in quieter reflections about the human side of the profession. That night, Craig spoke about a young field reporter who had covered a devastating story earlier that week. "She did everything right," he said thoughtfully, leaning against the counter, "but you could tell it stayed with her." Lindsay nodded with a kind of recognition only another journalist could offer. She had seen the same pattern in newsrooms across the country, the unspoken expectation that reporters absorb tragedy and simply move on to the next assignment. "People think the camera protects you," she said gently, "but it doesn't." That conversation lingered with Craig long after the dishes were cleared and the evening settled into quiet. For viewers at home, journalists often appear composed, almost immune to the emotional turbulence of the stories they cover. But Craig knew the truth was more complicated. The people delivering the news were also human beings carrying the echoes of every story they witnessed. As the years passed, Craig began to speak more openly within the newsroom about the importance of mental health support for field journalists. It wasn't always an easy conversation. Newsrooms are places built on urgency and resilience, environments where deadlines leave little room for reflection. Yet Craig believed that acknowledging emotional strain was not a sign of weakness, it was a sign of respect for the profession itself. He encouraged younger reporters to take time after difficult assignments to talk about what they had experienced rather than burying it beneath the next deadline. Sometimes the change began with simple gestures, checking in after a tough story, asking how someone was really doing instead of assuming they were fine. Over time, those small acts created something powerful, a culture of care that reminded journalists they were not alone in carrying the weight of the news. Craig often reflected on how different the industry looked now compared with when he first stepped into a newsroom decades earlier. The pace had accelerated, the news cycle had become relentless, and the stories themselves often felt heavier in an uncertain world. Yet, one truth remained unchanged. People trusted journalists to tell the stories that mattered most. Protecting the mental health of those journalists, Craig believed, was part of honoring that trust. When he spoke about the subject publicly, he did so with the calm clarity that viewers had come to recognize. He didn't dramatize the issue or present himself as an authority. Instead, he spoke as someone who had spent a lifetime learning the quiet lessons of the profession. "We ask our reporters to go where the story is," he once said during a discussion about newsroom culture, "but we also have to make sure they know someone is looking out for them when they come back." The words resonated with audiences who had spent their own lives in demanding careers, people who understood the importance of compassion after decades of responsibility. At home, Lindsay remained both his sounding board and his reminder that balance was possible. On evenings when the news cycle felt particularly heavy, she would gently steer their conversations toward ordinary things, family, memories, small moments of laughter that had nothing to do with broadcasting. Those moments helped Craig remember why the work mattered in the first place. Journalism, at its best, wasn't simply about delivering information, it was about serving communities with honesty while protecting the humanity of the people doing the work. As the years moved forward, and Craig Melvin continued to greet viewers each morning with the calm assurance they had come to trust, he carried that philosophy with him like an invisible compass. Behind every story reported from the field was a journalist who deserved care, understanding, in the simple reassurance that their well-being mattered as much as the headlines they helped bring to light. For Craig, that realization became one of the most meaningful lessons of a long career, that the true duty of journalism isn't only to inform the public, but also to protect the people courageous enough to tell the world's most difficult stories.